Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or The Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in depth into my week number 14 defenses to stream for the 2022 fantasy football season. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so. It's going to fly onto the screen right now at Notorious FNTSY. If you have any questions about week 14, please ask down below in the comment section. Today's video is brought to you guys by DraftKings Sportsbook. We're going to be talking about it a little bit later. Also important to note, there are 6 teams on bye this week: the Atlanta Falcons, the Chicago Bears, the Green Bay Packers, the Indianapolis Colts, the New Orleans Saints, and the Washington Commanders. So there's a little bit less pickings at the defense position this week. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 14 defenses to stream. We begin with my number 1 defense to be streaming on the week, the Kansas City Chiefs at the Denver Broncos, currently owned in 65% of leagues on Yahoo Fantasy. So if you play on NFL, ESPN, CBS, any of those other fantasy football platforms, that it is important to note that in some cases, there might be a slight difference in ownership percentage, though I will note in other cases, there might be a drastic difference depending on the website you play on and the defense that we are talking about. So the Chiefs defense in week 13 up against the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati. They got the Joe Shiesty experience, 1 sack and 27 points allowed. It is safe to say at this point that Joe Burrow is the rightful owner of the Kansas City Chiefs. The Ravens went toe-to-toe with the Denver Broncos last week in a game that they lost, but they only allowed 9 points in that game, and they had 2 sacks. Now, the Denver Broncos offense is almost at this point laughably bad, and it's not just laughable like, haha, so fucking funny. It's like, haha, where you start to kind of cry a little bit because you are embarrassed for how big of a disaster this season has been for the Denver Broncos. Now, again, I'm not telling you guys that the Kansas City Chiefs are this world-beating defense, right? We saw it last week up against the Chiefs. They can definitely be exploited, but ultimately, Russell Wilson is just off his fucking rocker. Russell Wilson is playing absolutely atrocious this season, and with how bad that offense is playing, I would genuinely be shocked if the Kansas City defense wasn't one of the top defenses on the week. At number 2, we move to the Pittsburgh Steelers going up against the Baltimore Ravens at home in Pittsburgh, 28% owned on Yahoo. The Steelers defense in week number 13 up against the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta, and they had 1 sack, 1 interception, and 16 points allowed. Last week, we talked pretty heavily and pretty highly about the Pittsburgh Steelers defense and how that with TJ Watt back, this defense has just been pushed up to a whole nother level. Now, I understand that prior to last week, the numbers didn't really say that. The numbers weren't necessarily super positive thinking towards how much better this defense is with TJ Watt back, but last week we saw up against Atlanta how legit this Steelers defense can be, and the Ravens offense is down astronomical without Lamar Jackson. Now, John Harbaugh, head coach of the Baltimore Ravens, said that Lamar Jackson's injury is not season ending, which is great to hear if you have Lamar Jackson in fantasy, but he is going to be out days to weeks. And when someone puts days to weeks, to me, that tells me that Lamar Jackson will not be suiting up on Sunday up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, obviously, anything is possible in the NFL, and I am far from a doctor, and I will always say that, but at the end of the day, I would be fucking perplexed, shocked if we did see Lamar Jackson suit up on Sunday up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are yet another defense that I love this week. It is important to note that these 2 defenses, in my opinion, are much better than the rest. There are a lot of teams on bye, like we talked about in the intro of today's video, so it is a little bit harder to find defenses that I love this week. Next up, we move to turn your volume down, the Las Vegas Raiders going up against the LA Rams in LA. 11% owned over on Yahoo Fantasy. The Raiders defense in week 13 up against the LA Chargers. They had 5 sacks, 1 fumble recovery, and 14 points allowed. And to be honest with you, that was very impressive in my opinion. I really thought that the LA Chargers offense was going to lay an ass whooping onto the Rams defense, or the Raiders defense, I should say, right? I thought that Justin Herbert, the pervert, was going to go out there and carve up the Raiders defense like they were the Thanksgiving turkey, but ultimately that did not end up happening, and the Raiders defense played well. Now, I am not someone that now magically believes that the Raiders have a great defense, because this year, the Raiders defense has been one of the worst, one of the nut-low defenses in the National Football League. But what I do know is that streaming a defense up against a second or third string quarterback, the Rams got John Wolford under center. That should be relatively positive. Seahawks defense week 13 at the LA Rams, 4 sacks, 2 interceptions, and 23 points allowed. The Seahawks were a defense that we talked about last week, and they ended up paying off swimmingly. Now, there's a big difference, again, between the Raiders and the Seahawks defense. The Seahawks have one of the more underrated defensive units in the NFL, and the Raiders, they're not really overrated, right? Because I don't think anyone's overrating them after one good game, but they have one of the worst defenses in the NFL. So here, it's all about the matchup. Again, the Raiders defense are no world beaters, but the Rams offense, I know they looked really good last week. I really don't see that happening again here up against the Las Vegas Raiders. Before we move on in to the final 2 defenses to stream on the week, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our sponsor over at DraftKings Sportsbook. Now, if you're a brand new first-time DraftKings Sportsbook customer and you make a deposit of $5 or more into your sportsbook account and place a $5 wager on any pre-game money line from now until the end of December, you will receive $150 in free bets if your team wins. So again, to clarify, bet $5 on any sport pre-game money line, and if your bet wins, you will receive $150 in free bets. Now, personally, I look to go for whatever the safest bet I believe is going to be on the week. Now, obviously, we all know anything can happen. Anything can happen, but I'm going to throw it on the screen right now, and I'm just going to show you guys my personal favorite pick of the week. You can disagree with my pick. You can pick something else. But again, all you got to do is bet $5 on any pregame money line, any sport, and you will win $150 in free bets if that team wins. Again, make sure that you click on the link in the video description down below to activate your offer. And if you live in Maryland, you'll receive $200 in free bets instead of $150. So back on into things, we now move to defense number 4 on the week, and that is the Atlanta Titans, the Tennessee Titans, going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars, 31% owned on Yahoo. Now again, in order to throw some premise onto what I'm talking about here, I want you guys to understand, the first 2 defenses, they're in a tier of their own. I really like both of those defenses. Then there's a little bit of a fall off. Not a crazy amount. Like, I still like the Raiders. They're in a tier of their own. And then here, number 4 defense, the Titans, and the number 5 defense these are prayers. You're saying, you know what? I need a new defense that I need to stream on the week. There's not a lot available. Let me go with these 2. Again, I'm not saying these are definitely smash defenses. I definitely prefer the other 3 ahead of them, but there's also a lot worse options than these teams. So the Titans, week 13, up against the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia, got their shit stomped in. 2 sacks, 35 points allowed. And I'm not surprised one bit. I am not surprised at all that the Les Titans ended up just getting destroyed, right? It should have been a shock to no one. Now, I know it wasn't like the Eagles were favored by 12, 14 points, something crazy in that game, right? They weren't. But we all know deep down that the Philadelphia Eagles are a much better team than the Titans. But the same thing can't be said about how the Titans are a much worse team than the Jaguars, right? I know the Jaguars ended up having Trevor Lawrence get hurt. Trevor Lawrence resurrects, comes back into the game. Shout out to him. I genuinely thought that he was done for. I thought he was done for the year. This was going to be some serious shit where maybe he misses part of next season. It looked incredibly bad. And then somehow, in the third quarter, he just walks onto the field like it's nothing. Truly shocking. And I talked about this on Twitter. I made a joke. I'm now free from Twitter. I was banned from Twitter yesterday. But I tweeted about how some people call Trevor Lawrence touchdown Jesus. He truly is touchdown Jesus because he was resurrected, baby. So Lions defense, week 13 versus Jacksonville. Again, the Lions are one of the worst defenses in the NFL. 2 sacks, 1 fumble recovery, and 14 points allowed. Again, I'm not banging the drum aggressively for the Titans defense. I'm not getting on my knees and giving them the metaphorical dick suck gawk gawk 9,000. But what I will tell you is that there's a lot worse options than the Titans' final defense to discuss in today's video. We got the Cincinnati Bengals going up against Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns. 25% owned. The Bengals defense week 13 up against the Chiefs stood on their head. 2 sacks, 1 fumble recovery, and 24 points allowed. An incredibly gutful, I was going to say a gutless performance, but it's the exact opposite of that. Like an incredible performance by the defense up against Patrick Mahomes, really limiting Travis Kelce in that game. Very impressive. The Browns, on the other hand, were a unmitigated disaster on offense. Now, obviously, they end up beating the Texans by what felt like 40 points. But it's because the Browns defense did everything. Deshaun Watson looked like a chicken with his head cut off behind the offensive line. This man was throwing the football to Manti Te'o's girlfriend, to no one, because she doesn't exist, if you remember that story. He's throwing the ball into the fucking dirt. It was embarrassing. Embarrassing. And anyone who started Deshaun Watson was probably incredibly saddened by what happened. It was so bad. And now he goes up against one of the mid defenses in the NFL. Again, I'm not saying the Bengals are a great defense, but they're also not the Texans. And the Texans defense had 1 sack, 1 INT, 1 fumble recovery, 1 safety, and 15 points allowed. Again, the only reason why the Browns won was because the defense put the team on the fucking backpack like Dora, okay? Shout out to Boots. I think that the Texans' defense isn't good at all, and they looked like the 85 Bears against the Browns. So while it might be risky, while maybe Watson figures more shit out, maybe he was just flustered because he went back home to Houston and all the emotions got to him, right? And maybe he's about to unload on the Bengals defense. But with how he played, I don't think that's going to end up happening. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you ended up enjoying, make sure you smash that subscribe button down below like it owes you money. Make sure you hit that like button on today's video. It helps me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. Please make sure that you check out this great offer from DraftKings. Again, bet $5 on any pre-game money line, any sport, and you will win $150 in free bets as long as your bet wins. Make sure you guys take advantage of that down below. I love all of you guys so much. I hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, we'll be back with the waiver wire video later. Good boy!